Thank you for joining this session on how conservation districts can support female forest landowners. I'm Doug Rushton. I'm from Washington State. I'm a forest landowner and a professional certified forester and a Pacific region rep on the Forestry Resource Policy Group. I may slip and say that's the RPG, which means role-playing game to me, which that's not our committee. We don't play roles, we just do our job. Anyway, RPG means Resource Policy Group. I would like to say a couple things that nobody has said before, and I'd like to thank both Steve Hedstrom as our chair for the RPG and Mike Beacom, who's our forestry specialist from NACD, for doing the background and coordination work on these sessions. Thanks a lot for that. I'm glad it was you and not me. I would like to tell people this is a live session and it is being recorded. This is the last of the 7 forestry webinars that were started at 7 o'clock Pacific time this morning. And we have 2 presentations that'll be done during this session. Please mute yourself. We'll have questions and answers at the end. And if you have a question or a comment, go to the chat function, which is at the bottom of your screen. You can plug that in, and Mike or I will grab that. And if you need follow-up, please send an email to Mike Beacom, whose address is on the NACD website. And lastly, look on the NACD website early next week. We're hoping that this will be on the website by then, and we're also hoping for an Oscar nomination for the best documentary of 2020. So we'll see how that goes. Okay, getting into it a little more here. I started with the Forest Service a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. At that time, females worked only in the office, administration, accounting, and the like. And on the district I was on, there were no females in the field. Look around now. Just take a second to think. Please note, for example, that the chief of the Forest Service is a woman. And if you scroll through various forestry and other organizations, many, many females are leaders, both in the field and in the office. To quote Bob Dylan, times they are a-changin', and I think for the better. Anecdotal information basically says that more males are dealt with in forestry landowner situations, as females make up 50.8% of the US population. It seems very practical to step our engagement of female forest landowners. Too many F's there. It certainly appears, at least, that we may be underserving female forest landowners. This session is about addressing a stepping up of how we do that. And we have 2 female forest landowners, one from New Hampshire, Linda Brownson, and one from Washington State, Lynn Bahrych, to give initial insights on how this might happen. And thank you to both Lynn and Linda for contributing their time to this effort. Lynn will go first. She lives in the San Juan Islands, specifically on Shaw Island, which is in the middle of the San Juans in Puget Sound in Washington State, where she owns forest land. And some of us consider the San Juan Islands the Shangri-La of the Pacific Northwest. It's a really cool place. She has a background in medieval and Renaissance literature, which I find very impressive, having liked that stuff myself, and a law degree from the University of Washington, and she focuses on land use and environmental law. Besides serving on our local district board, she has been with the state association, her local board, and has served 3 terms on the Washington State Conservation Commission. Linda is from New Hampshire. She manages 200 acres of mixed hardwood and conifer forest land on the west foothills of the White Mountains. She also serves on her local board. And besides being on the Forestry RPG, she represents the Northeast region on the NACD Executive Board, and is also president of the New Hampshire Timberland Owners Association. They'll be addressing kind of what they're doing now, efforts that they've seen to support female forest landowners, experiences that would encourage female forest landowners in CD forestry, roadblocks and hindrances, once they've identified or are aware of, and what could be done, lessons learned, and an opportunity for the future. Lynn will be going first, and then when she gets done, we'll switch to Linda. So Lynn, please start. Need to unmute yourself first.
There, can you hear me now?
Yeah, primo.
Okay, all right. As Doug said, my name is Lynn Bahrych, and I'm a small forest landowner in San Juan County. I've got 60 acres. We're in the northwest corner of Washington State, surrounded by the Salish Sea, and look north to more forested islands in the Gulf Islands. So this is an archipelago that is basically forested mountaintops surrounded by saltwater, and where the islands are at this point densely overforested because we have suppressed forest fires for over 100 years. So in my county, in San Juan County, my district, the San Juan Islands Conservation District, is very focused on wildfire risk. One of the things that we've learned in the last few years is, from the state's point of view, our Department of Natural Resources is manages our state forests, and they are the firefighting agency in the state. San Juan County on their state map is shown as red. We're a red zone, and there aren't very many red zones. That means that we're the highest fire risk, one of the highest fire risks in the state. And the reason for that is that we have suppressed fires for over 100 years. And we've got now, in fact, I own a densely overgrown, basically unhealthy forest. I'm looking at it out the windows, and I'm not alone. Most of the forest landowners in San Juan County have the same, look at the same dense overgrowth that we have not allowed nature to do the normal fire ecology work of keeping the forest healthy and open. And so our district we've started a forest health initiative, which we launched last year with our lands commissioner, came from Olympia to help us launch it. And we're trying to get a community fire prevention plan in place. So that's our big focus is wildfire. That's the major risk. We've got drought also is a problem here, believe it or not, in the Pacific Northwest, where it supposedly rains all the time. We don't have consistent rains through the summer. So many of our cedars are starting to die. They're very water dependent. And so we have a drought factor that plays into the wildfire risk. So our biggest concerns for the conservation district and forestry issues are wildfire and then drought as it affects our forests. When Doug asked me to do this, I have to hand it to him for bringing this to my attention, because even though I'm a woman who owns a forest, I had never really thought about the differences between, or the differences that could exist between managing a forest that's owned by a woman and managing a forest that's owned by a man. I just hadn't thought about it. And now that I've been thinking about it, it really makes sense to me for our district to start paying attention to some of the different approaches that men and women might take to managing their forests. And I think as much because culturally it's kind of the Paul Bunyan thing, you know, the gender that's out in the woods cutting down the trees is Paul Bunyan. You know, there's no equivalent woman cultural icon for forestry, and yet as Doug said, we probably in San Juan County have a majority of women owning the forests. So I'm so grateful to him for asking me to think about this, because it's really important now. It's going to be increasingly important. We need to get all of our forest landowners on board in our effort to make our forests healthier, not just by thinning, but their forest health, the health of forest soils, and the ways in which we can retain and conserve water in forests. There's a lot of issues that we need to be addressing with climate change here, not just on the horizon, but actually here. So one of the things that we're looking at are obstacles. And I see one of them is just a lack of role models, because although, as Doug mentioned, the head of the U.S. Forest Service is now a woman, in San Juan County, I can't think of a single woman forester. I mean, I've been here for 40 years. I know most of the people who work in environmentally related or conservation related work, and I can't think of a single woman forester. I've got a couple of crews that I've been working with, and they're all male. We did have a forest planner in the conservation district, a wonderful, really, really smart woman who was doing the forest plans, but she's now running her family's CSA farm and raising 2 small children. So she's not on the district staff anymore. So we just have entirely male staff dealing with forestry issues. So that it's hard if you don't see a woman in action in the forest or in the woods, or planning, doing forest plans, or doing the actual work of thinning or whatever the forestry task might be. It's hard to imagine that if you don't see it. So I think one of the obstacles is going to be trying to find and highlight those women who are interested and capable of working in this area. Aside from providing some role models, another obstacle, I think, is just the problem that I've described, which is we just haven't been paying attention to different ways of approaching different landowners. And I'll give you an example that's really close to home. Part of, because I'm on the district and we've got this forest health initiative, I wanted to do a demonstration project in my own forest. And so I have a forest plan done by an excellent forest planner, who's a man, and most of his crew are men, and they did a beautiful job with my forest plan. So I've applied for a EQIP, Natural Resource Conservation Service grant, to do a fuel break. It's my first step in my forest plan, is a fuel break along the county road that borders my property. So this is a fire protection measure. And so I applied with NRCS, and in the course of discussing this with him, they warned me that I may not like it when it's done, that it could look pretty ugly. The amount of trees and everything that has to be taken out to satisfy the specifications for this grant, it could end up looking pretty ugly. So I thought, I'm not sure I want to do that. And that's kind of where it was left. But then one of my local foresters talked to me about it, because he's bidding on the job, and he walked me through the area that's going to be thinned and showed me what would be taken out, what would be left in, and why. And I could see that at the end of the day, it was going to be not only healthier, it was also going to be more beautiful. And this was just a matter of educating me. First, he listened to my concerns, because I viewed the forest as a community. That's a kind of a village of trees, and I'm not really happy about having any of them cut down and taken away. So, I mean, that may just be my own eccentricity, but he listened to that, and he knew my default position is don't cut it down. So he listened carefully, explained why all the trees are going to be happier when they've got more air. They're not competing for water and nutrients. They are, respecting the different types of trees and the little communities that form there, leaving them intact. So by the end of the afternoon, I understood my forest better. I understood why it's going to be healthier, and it's also going to look better. And so we're going to do this fuel break. But I think that's kind of a good example of educating a forest landowner, whether male or female. They're not necessarily well-versed in forestry issues, don't necessarily understand the ecology of a forest, but want it to be healthy, want it to be safe, want it to be beautiful. And approaching it in a holistic way like that, an environmentally sensitive way, paying attention as he did when we had this conversation to the way it would affect the animals that live here, the other plants, the whole picture, you know, how the entire community of plants and animals is going to be benefited by this good forestry practice. So, you know, it's just a small success story, but I think if there'd been a woman on the district who could have had this conversation with me, it would have been great. But I don't think that the gender is so important in that regard. But thinking about what, as a, you know, thinking about the inclinations that I have as a woman forest owner, which is to protect this community of trees, which is for it to be healthy and for it to be safe for my community. And those are things that men think of too, but I think approaching me that way is much better than we're going to give you X number of dollars to cut down X number of trees. So it's made me really think about how, as a district, first of all, we need to know how many women forest owners do we have, because I don't think we even know that. So first of all, figuring out what the terrain is here, and then putting together some different approaches that address the issues, you know, aesthetic, even spiritual issues in a way that will appeal to these landowners. So they'll be willing to have someone come on their land and cut trees and remove shrubs. And it's, you know, it's a big commitment to make a change like that. So anyway, I'm just really pleased that Doug asked me to do this. I'm thinking about it in a completely new way. Honestly, it just seems so obvious now, but I hadn't thought about it like that. So yeah, I'm just I'm really going to be interested in pursuing this and hearing from Linda, who's got a lot more experience than I do. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Lynn. Actually, we'll save the questions to the end unless somebody has a chat that they want to do. And again, the chat button is at the bottom of your screen, and we will get to them. Thank you, Lynn, very much. Linda, I didn't mention your restaurateur background because I don't know it well enough, but the diversity of your background has always very much impressed me. So please take it away.
Okay. Well, first, like Lynn, I would like to say thank you, Doug, for introducing this topic, because I too really didn't give it a lot of thought until just recently, maybe in the last year, when I've had some women approach me about the subject. So, so the way I'm going to talk is first describing my forest land, and then the steps that I took to get engaged. They didn't always involve conservation districts. They didn't from the start, but they're instructive because districts could be part of those organizations that engage women. So I'm located in the western foothills of the White Mountains in north central New Hampshire, Grafton County. I'm just 12 miles from the Connecticut River, which forms the boundary between New Hampshire and Vermont. My 200-acre woodlot is situated on a southern ridge. Elevation is about 1,500 feet in the towns of Wentworth and Orford, just 1 mile from the White Mountains National Forest, and just a half a mile from the Appalachian Trail. This woodlot is approximately 85% forested, with some open fields of grassland, a pond, and a excuse me, a blueberry field. It consists of mainly mixed hardwoods and conifers. Prominent species include red oak, American beech, sugar maple, red maple, mountain maple, white ash, white and yellow birch, hop hornbeam, eastern white pine, eastern hemlock, red spruce, balsam fir, trembling, and big tooth aspen. In addition to trees, we have a lot of glacial erratics that dot the landscape, giant boulders that were left behind by glaciers. We're not called the Granite State for nothing. So you have a picture of what it kind of looks like. When I first became a forest landowner, that was in 2003, when my husband and I purchased an old historic farm dating back to the 1780s. I had just completed my PhD at Boston University and was poised for a consulting career. And that all changed when I became utterly enchanted with our 200 acres of forest land, with its diversity of flora and fauna and geological wonders to explore. All I could think about was, how can I possibly learn enough about this beautiful land to be a good steward? Where can I go for help? And what resources are there out there? So that's how I got started. I did learn the first thing about the New Hampshire Coverts Project. I'm not sure how many states have such a project, from an article in Northern Woodlands magazine, my first valuable resource in learning about the forest and wildlife. It's a magazine I still read cover to cover every month. The Coverts Project is a program that trains volunteers to promote wildlife habitat and habitat conservation and forest stewardship. It's a 4-day intensive study and field observation course that's held at a camp where experts on wildlife, forests, grasslands, and more convene to teach the students a valuable experience and opportunity to meet others wanting to learn how to take care of this land and its wildlife. After the course, we covered, not covert, volunteers commit to bringing the message of wildlife stewardship to a wide range of people across the state. This is something that I thought produced a lot of camaraderie with the women who were enrolled in this. So we would bunk together, you know, for 4 days and get to talk about each other's forest land. And, you know, conservation districts could be a partner in that. And also, I'm thinking that this is a statewide program, but after you graduate, so to speak, you know, local districts can kind of take over with follow-up courses that would keep them engaged and enhance the subjects. We've also developed an offshoot program called Speaking for Wildlife, for which I traveled all over the state giving slideshow presentations to libraries, schools, and social clubs and districts, actually, and on the natural history of wildlife and how to create wildlife habitat on your land. Not surprisingly, when it came time for me to finally develop a forest stewardship plan with a licensed forester, I chose wildlife habitat creation and maintenance as the organizing principle of my plan. Through these preliminary training programs and the instructors, I learned about conservation districts and the work of NRCS. My conservation district engaged me immediately and kept me informed about relevant workshops and demonstrations that I could attend. And some of them were delivered jointly with the University of New Hampshire Cooperative Extension, New Hampshire Fish and Game, and other partner organizations. I guess I must have taken 100 courses and workshops, probably in the first 2 years of this, because I was so hungry to learn. To be honest, I don't recall any particular special effort by our conservation district or other local organizations to include female forest land owners. Everything seemed to be wide open to whoever wanted to partake. And it seemed like women were well represented, that they wanted to know. I don't know how many were actually forest land owners. So as my forest stewardship mission became more clearly defined, I started working with NRCS and became a supervisor for my district and later a state association president. And using my forest stewardship plan as the foundation, We all work together planning practices with timelines in my Grafton County district. So over the course of several years, some of the practices included tree shrub establishment, early successional habitat development, creating forest trails and landings, mass tree release, intensive pollinator habitat, creating brush piles for upland wildlife habitat, delayed mowings of fields, invasives management, installation of stream crossing culverts, creating soft edges around fields, and reclaiming a 5-acre blueberry field. In addition, I received a grant from the Wildlife Management Institute to create and maintain habitat for the American woodcock, which provided the opportunity to continue discussing this type of work with their wildlife biologists who monitored our progress every year. The forest land today is thriving with even greater diversity because of all the conservation practices that were put in place. The creation of 20 acres of shrubland patch cuts over time has benefited over 100 species of mammals and birds that need those shrublands, which are now a disappearing habitat type. This habitat supports white-tailed deer, black bear, moose, and upland birds such as grouse, woodcock, and turkey. Building a half-acre spring-fed deep pond enabled me to introduce our native eastern brook trout, which my local conservation district supplies me with every year. Because of the great blue herons and osprey who visit to harvest some of the fish, along with all the resident amphibians that come with a healthy pond, keeping me up at night when the croaking is full blast. We do have pathogens to contend with in this forested area. Beech bark scale disease, for example, is widespread. Also, there's some damage from the white pine weevil, though most of the eastern white pines found on the property have not been attacked so far. I understand that the emerald ash borer has arrived in our area now, but I've yet to see a tree affected, and I'm always looking. There's always something to learn and observe every time you go into the woods, and hosting educational tours and demonstrations is my favorite use of the land, often with my conservation district and with our cooperative extension, other times with local schools. Forestry has been traditionally a male-dominated field, but today I'm observing more and more women landowners are responsible for managing their forest land. One program that I have seen to encourage female landowners in conservation district forestry is a new program starting at the Somerset County Conservation District in neighboring Maine. I interviewed them recently for a magazine article, and they were very excited about this program called Women Owning Woodlands. This is part of a national Women Owning Woodlands web project that supports women in forest leadership, women who manage their own woodlands, and all who facilitate the stewardship of forests. At the Somerset
Linda, if
yeah.
I could interrupt just for a second, people are having trouble hearing you. I'm not sure if you're far away from the mic or exactly what's up, but
I'll move closer. I'm sorry.
well, thank
Sounds
you.
so loud to me.
That sounds great now.
Okay. At the Somerset County Soil and Water Conservation District, they're piloting this Women Owning Woodlands, which is aimed at providing opportunities for women to join with their peers and gain the knowledge and confidence that leads to actively participating in forest stewardship. And in looking at their program, they do have women instructors for all of their sessions. I'm guessing that this program will spread to other districts. Though personally, I don't feel that I was hindered or obstructed from learning what I needed to know about forest management, but there was one area that was somewhat intimidating. There were available courses for mechanical harvesting that seemed to all require things like significant chainsaw experience, for example. And at the New Hampshire Timber Landowners Association last year, which I'm a part of, actually president of, we hired a new female program director who added courses such as felling for women. beginner course and things like forest fungi to appeal more to women, inviting them in. This is a great way to encourage female forest land owners to learn more and network with other women forest stewards. I know from years of teaching hunter safety education that the reason most women gave me for not obtaining their hunting license was that they perceived that the classroom environment would have a macho tone that they would feel uncomfortable with. That wasn't actually the case in my experience, but it's the perception that counts. Districts can also learn from other organizations who are empowering and educating women forest landowners. One such organization I know of is the Delaware Highlands Conservancy in Pennsylvania. One of my forestry network members told me about. It's called Women and Their Woods, and it's teaching women to effectively care for their forest land. They are aiming to build a sense of confidence and empowerment in women's abilities to meet the challenges of forest land ownership. And they're enjoying a huge success. If you go on their website, you can see the photo of many participants at their last educational retreat. So they meet throughout the year. This year is a virtual program, of course, to learn about forest management and share potluck meals. Topics include tree ID, forest measurements, creating a dynamic plan, wildlife habitat, forest ecology, and invasive control, among many. This is something a district can also do, especially if they have a forester or two on board to help direct the effort. I would like to see more of these programs for women, as they obviously have caught on in the few places where they are offered. Women are sole or co-owners of over half of woodland properties nationwide. I read that exact figure, Lynn, you were asking about, and I didn't write it down, but it is a little over half. Yet the data show that women are far less likely than men to participate in management activities. Forest stewardship is a critical piece in any global climate change solution. So it just makes sense to focus some of our district activity around educating and empowering our women woodland owners. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Linda, and thanks for tolerating the interjection I had there.
I'm glad you did. I hope I wasn't aware of it.
I've noted a couple of items, well, more than a couple of items that were brought forth. Lynn mentioned lack of role models, be aware of cultural biases, look for ways to engage women, be a good listener and pay attention to the landowner's views. Note that females look at their land as a community, a village of a different sort, not as individual marketable logs. And she mentioned, and Linda mentioned it too, how many female forest landowners do we have? I did some research on that. I looked at the Brett Butler stuff and Women Owning Woodlands and couldn't find a good number. So maybe that's something we can do. And then Linda mentioned encourage women to get involved. We need to be aware of the incompatibility with the macho tone of some of our meetings. Learn from other women and women-oriented organizations, and look for training and educational opportunities. I think those are all really good things. Okay, I don't see any questions particularly oriented toward either Linda or Lynn in the chat room. Lots of comments about the Women Owning Woodlands and the Delaware program. So what I'm going to do is, I guess the good news would be that we could get done earlier. I don't know about some of you, but I've been on this all day. and it's been a long day. But please, if you have questions, please send them right now. That'd be great. Going on the premise that we would like to increase engagement of women forest landowners, we need to look how we do our jobs and be open to changing how we do business, looking for innovative ideas that both Lynn and Linda have mentioned, different ways of looking at how we do things, and even plagiarizing what we see others doing. And we talked about Women Owning Woodlands and other projects. And again, this stuff will be on the website next week. I thought it was curious in preparing for this. There was an article on July 26th in the Toronto National Post that was entitled, and this is what the study said: nations led by women outclass those led by males when it comes to pandemic response. I'll read it again. Nations led by women outclass those led by males when it comes to pandemic response. And this was a study that looked at New Zealand, Germany, and Bangladesh, which are led by women, and compared them to similar countries with similar demographics, but with male leaders. And the study found that the outcomes were significantly better in the countries led by women. They're quicker to adopt the protective measures such as social distancing. They were more risk averse than the men. They were more measured in their approaches. And maybe, just maybe, there's something here we can learn to apply to how we do business. While this is just one study and can't be extrapolated across the board to all kinds of issues, maybe, just maybe, by engaging more female forest landowners with their different perspectives, we can get better outcomes in how we deliver our services. That's the bottom line for us, is how we service landowners. And if we're missing a significant portion by biases or oversight or whatever reason, I personally don't think that's a particularly good thing.
Hey, Doug, there was a request, the possibility of having Catherine or Angela just talk a little bit about Women Owning Woodlands and the program.
Yeah, that would be great. How about Angela, you go first for like 2 minutes.
Sure. So Angela Gupta, hopefully you can hear me. I'm a University of Minnesota Extension forester who's worked with Minnesota Women's Woodland Network for over a decade now, from when we began it as a University of Minnesota Extension program. It's since morphed into an independent nonprofit and is now a part of our statewide Minnesota Forestry Association, which is a standalone entity. And for maybe the last 6 years, I'm not actually positive, I've been a regular contributor to the Women Owning Woodlands website. And so you can see articles from me. The one I think it's currently running in the top bar is worms. So it is a nationally funded program to engage women woodland owners, and I think it's been pretty successful. It is, Kathleen can jump in and say more. I'm going to pass it to her in a moment. But it is a single platform that women can really connect with. It has activities by region. It has activities. It has regional activities, and it has there's a great effort put into curating topics and making sure that they're timely and informative and new and fresh and all of those things. So if folks are not familiar with Women Owning Woodlands, I would recommend you follow us and you engage with that platform. It has really great broad national scope. And with that, I'll pass it off to Kathleen and she can say more.
Thank you.
Hi, Catherine Hollins. Thanks for the minute. Nancy Baker put the link to the website in the chat box so people can get there. And there is a component of professional folks that have a Google group and a listserv so that they can communicate with questions and ideas. And we do have some research in that group. You can find it through the womenowningwoodlands.net about women woodland owners and potentially some of the hesitations that some women have had with engaging with their land. So I would like to caution folks that Lynn and Linda might be an exception to the rule sometimes. So there are women out there who do sometimes hesitate to engage. And I guess Linda talked about that, about the chainsaw workshops and the hunting workshops. So there are opportunities, I think, to make sure women do feel welcomed by either having women-focused activities or I guess like the regular same workshop, but just for women. And then also thinking about expanding activities beyond maybe the kind of typical ones of forest restoration or wildlife habitat, and thinking about topics that might engage a slightly different audience, whether that's men or women, but maybe foraging, non-timber forest products, that sort of thing. And I will leave it with that.
Those are both great comments. Thank you very much. I think Lynn has a question. You're on mute, Lynn.
Mute myself. Yeah, that just made me think, listening to Angela and Catherine, my daughter will be inheriting my woodland. She's pretty handy with the chainsaw. She's also really good at online everything. We're looking at a generational shift. You know, most of the women forest owners in San Juan County are my age or even, you know, older, and we're going to be there's going to be a big transfer to the next generation. And I think that generation, you know, they have some capabilities that I certainly don't have. They have some different needs, and I really think it would be good. It's making me think I really need to pay attention to what the next generation of women owning forests are going to be capable of and willing to do. That's just another layer that I hadn't thought about. And one other thing that I thought about as everybody was talking, Linda said something about forest fungi. I was reading, you know, women all over the world gather, you know, things from the forest that is the foundation of their local economy. And I think approaching women in terms of what you can, like in my forest, salal is a very valuable item for what am I trying to say? For sale, for yeah, it's just it's a horticultural product is what I'm trying to say, and it has to be carefully harvested. But looking at forests as a source of income is another aspect.
Thank you, Lynn.
So this is Angie. I would be happy to respond to Lynn if that's all right.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so Lynn, you make some interesting and good observations. And I will say in our Master Woodland Owner class, which is not our Minnesota Women's Woodland Network, right? So this is our sort of regular landowner education, if you will. We had a very significant educational model shift through that Master Woodland Owner program from a diffuse model that was in person, that was 75% men, 25% women, that actually that disparity caused us to launch the Minnesota Women's Woodland Network. And then about 5 or 6 years later, we retooled that educational model, moved the Master Woodland Owner program to a flipped classroom model. So 6 months of deep engagement online in a small cohort, so a small group with about 3 different face-to-face workshops. And there have been some really interesting outcomes to that get to some of the things you're talking about. So we went to 75% men, 25% women in our old face-to-face dispersed model. And in our new online model, we have about 55% men, 45% women. So we're getting closer to parity. We're getting couples. We've never gathered same-sex gender questions before, but we are getting same-sex couples, and they're telling us through our engagement. We don't actually collect that information. So that is very interesting. We also are getting younger landowners. So maybe getting to your transfer question, the way in which we do that engagement has changed. And then maybe not a surprise, our largest cohorts ever have all launched during the pandemic. I think the woodland owners are kind of stuck at home, and so they're interested to do this online activity. And so that has all been really fascinating. And now we are challenging ourselves within that program to really look at how we can address systemic racism in woodland ownership. And that becomes we don't need to go down that rabbit hole because it is deep. But when you fundamentally have an audience that is based on land ownership, that immediately then dives into both gender limitations of land ownership. So in Minnesota, you couldn't own land until about 1900. And then, of course, it has massive racial implications. And so that may ultimately influence the way in which we do land transfer education. Okay, that was sort of a lot. I will yield the floor.
Thank you, Angela. Those are good comments. Appreciate it. And I would remind folks that Nancy Baker had sent the web link to Women Owning Woodlands in the chat, so you can look in the chat and get that. To me, this is kind of a stepping off point for looking at other underserved groups and how we're doing our job with respect to our entire society. I'm getting older and I don't like it much, but it's causing me to have to do things differently. And I think part of that is how I look at what other people are going through. So we need to respect that and honor that and help with that. And I think we're coming up against the time that we're done. And I'd like to thank you all, especially Linda Brownson, Linda Bahrych, and Mike Beacom for your earnest efforts in this. And remind you all, when you get your ballot for the Oscar nominations, to nominate NACD for Best Documentary. I think we're done. Michael Beacom.
Thanks all.